started. Good evening, everybody. I'm Susan Mancuso. I'm the Director of School Counseling here. Tonight, all of our counselors are here as well. We have Justin Smith, Dan Fitzgerald, Angela Carney, and Leanna Brown. We were hoping to live stream this evening, but we're having some issues, but it is being recorded. So this session will be available on ECAT if you ever want to refer back to it, or if you have friends who couldn't make it tonight, you can let them know that it will be available, okay? As well, tomorrow I will send out through Parent Square this PowerPoint and some of the handouts we've been sharing with the students, so you'll have the same information as well, okay? We did, just a caveat, we did update a few slides later this afternoon, so it might be slightly off from what you have, but again, I'm going to push out the new one tomorrow so you'll have the information, okay? So, there's plenty of room if anyone wants to sit up front, thank you. But we're so thrilled you could be here tonight. I know for many of you, this is your first child, and this is very stressful, and you're like, what are we doing, what to expect, what's going to happen? Any of you here for a refresher? All right, welcome back. Okay, so let's jump right in. Okay, so a lot of what we're going to be covering this evening is really about how to prepare and what to do between now and through the spring and into the summer to prepare for fall. And just so you know that we will also have a parent night in September, and at that point we'll talk more about the nuts and bolts in terms of, okay, how do we actually execute and get these applications out, who's responsible for sending what. Tonight, we're really talking about exploration and preparation, and that's our goal. So really about helping your child figure out their plan overall. We'll talk about testing, you know, how to actually dive into a college search, where to start, what to look for, questions to ask. We'll highlight the common application. We'll touch upon that briefly, and we'll get into it more in September. As well as deadlines. That's not necessary right now, but something to definitely keep in the back of your mind as they're starting to plan for the fall and what their deadlines will be. And then we'll just touch upon the college questionnaire and the parent brag sheet, just so you know what's available and what's out there. Okay, so again, we'll have these QR codes throughout the night up on the screen, and we'll take a few minutes to check for questions. This is new for us, so I'm going to turn over to Mr. Smith, who is going to lead this process.
Hi, everybody. So we're trying something new and trying to get live feedback from you during the session. We found that a lot of time you'll have a question and lose it in your head, and we get to the end of the presentation. And this is a good way. It's also if you scan the QR code in the packet, or if you hold your phone up and scan it up here, it brings you to a site called Menti. Menti will allow you to input whatever question you have, and it pops up on a screen for us that will pull up periodically throughout the meeting and try to nail down each question you might have along the way. So if you see a slide, if you see something live that someone says you have a question on it, pull up this QR code, go to the site and type your question and hit submit, and it comes to us, and hopefully we'll answer every question we can, and we'll still leave the Q&A question at the very end of things so that we can kind of try to get all questions answered at a variety of times throughout the presentation. So this overwhelming chart here is really a zoom out view of what we do when we talk to rising seniors, current juniors, in planning their life after high school. 80-some-odd% of our students will look at or go on to four-year colleges. However, while it monopolizes a lot of our conversations, we do introduce pathways to a lot of things because four-year college, while 80-some-odd% are going there, it is not the path for everybody. So what we do as counselors in our individual meetings and in our group meetings is try to present every pathway and try to find a plan for each student. Now sometimes that plan is super individualized, and we try to create pathways to show students exactly what could happen based on what pathway they're going down. So you can see this a little more clearly on your sheet in front of you, and Ms. Mancuso will also send it out so you have a larger version that you can zoom in on a bit. But everything from a bachelor's degree to four-year college to two-year colleges, all the way to whether your student is interested in a trade or a specialty type of school. And then we have a percentage of students who choose to work after high school or choose to enlist in armed services. And all of those conversations, we try to just lead that student down the road with things that will help get them there. So obviously the focus tonight would be on four-year college, since it is 80-some-odd% of our students who are doing that, but also know that that may not be the path for your student. And the pathways here and the way that things kind of trickle down are just the ways that we can help as school counselors. And if your student or your family has some particular idea or plan in mind for your student, don't hesitate to reach out to share it with us, because you are a massive part of the conversation and we're just trying to help in any way that we can. And sometimes the students with us will be very clear and decisive about what they want, but sometimes they're not as much. And having that conversation at home usually happens more often than it's happening in our office too. So where to start? So there's two things happening on a school basis. Most of us right now are pretty far into our junior one-on-one meetings. So each counselor looks a little different, but I know with me and my students, I'm going right down the alphabet, and I sit down with the student, I have a one-on-one to say, what's your plan? Let's talk it out, let's note a few steps that it's going to take us to get there. For some of us, we're starting a Common App application. For some of us, it's just a general conversation. But the expectation is that we meet, we talk about the plan, that student is hopefully going home to you, having a similar conversation, or ideally they've already started that conversation with you at home. The guidance website, which we'll show you a bit of that website related to the college application process in a few minutes with Mrs. Carney. And then using Naviance and College Board, those are two tools that will be explained in depth momentarily. Choosing a college, there are a ton of factors, and it's different for every student along the way. As that chart showed, there's 2-year colleges, there's 4-year colleges, and there's technical trade schools. There's a whole lot of programs in between that, we know a lot of information in the guidance department about those programs. Sometimes we're learning about new programs left and right, depending on what is available each year. We talk about public versus private schools and the costs associated with those. One of my main conversation starters with students is, number one, what size of school do you see yourself at college to plan? I know I went to look at UMass Amherst when I was 18 years old, and it scared the life out of me because it was the biggest place I had ever seen, and I had to take a bus to get to my first class, and it told me a lot about my own path, that I needed a smaller school. So I tell that story a lot because for students I emphasize school size as an important piece of the puzzle, and seeing colleges and stepping on campuses is really helpful for that. Secondly, the setting. Rural, suburban, urban. Basically, do you want to be the school that is, again, like UMass Amherst, which isn't exactly, there's a ton going on in the surrounding area. It's not exactly a city, it's more of a rural area in itself. Or do you see yourself at a Boston University, which is, the campus is Boston, essentially. And then location. Do you want to stay local? Do you want to stay in Massachusetts? The main thing I'm hearing this week is that my mom and dad want me to go to Stonehill, but I want to go to California. You're not in California now, but ultimately, we talk about the realistic nature of, all right, if you want to go to school in Colorado, you got to think about the plane ticket and the back and forth and the cost that's going to be. And I know mom and dad want you to stay close, but that should be a part of the conversation too. And ideally, we're working with the students to help create a balanced college list that maybe has a few of those faraway options, or a few of those close options, a few affordable options, a few, we don't aim for expensive options, but sometimes the students have those ones in mind, and we want all those things to be factored in when a student's making their college list. And then finally, cost and financial aid. We'll go into this part really in depth in a little bit, but we do talk about cost and the ability for a college to give financial aid. I'm finishing FAFSAs and financial aid forms with seniors now, and your juniors will be a part of that process coming up. Again, more information on that to come. And then when it comes to the actual school itself, every school differs a little bit. And these are things that we use our Naviance College platform for a lot. When it comes to what major you want to study, does the college you're looking at offer that major? Because you might be in love with Northeastern University, but you want to study veterinary sciences and they don't offer it, so maybe we shouldn't look at that one as deeply. So that's information that, again, we house and gather more every year in guidance. Admissions criteria. We compare the students' GPA, their SAT, and try to figure out how likely it is that they'll get into whatever school is on their mind. Now, obviously, students have big dreams and they want these high-level schools, and we do our best to kind of say, we want to aim for the stars and take that shot with you, but let's be realistic and have a balanced list to make sure that all bases are covered. You have The old school terms were safety school, target school, reach school, based on your own numbers in GPA and SAT. Another thing we emphasize is, while GPA and numbers are part of the equation, a lot of our students tend to say, really put a lot of pressure on the idea of, I need X GPA to do this at that school, because I Googled it, and Yale requires a 4.3, and I have a 4.21, and we try to temper expectations and also make students aware that you are not just a number. The application itself is a lot more than just that. For the school itself, housing options. Do you want to live on campus, off campus? Sports and activities. Do you want to play a sport in the college? Or do you want to be in an environment that has a Division I football team? You can go to the games. The culture of those schools kind of can relate to the sports and activities as well. And then specialized options. You can see the co-ed or single-sex schools, fraternities, sororities, religious affiliations, disability support services. There are a lot of schools that can offer a lot of different things, and we try to broach each subject with those students as we meet with them one-on-one, and we also provide them kind of this same larger view of what college admissions look like. And with that, Mr. Fitz, I'm going to hand it off to you to introduce Naviance and really the main college platforms that we use for research purposes.
Thank you very much. So, as Mr. Smith was saying, that I think many of our students right now are in that kind of building their list phase of the process. Not everyone necessarily is, but that's really where we're trying to get them to over the course of our meetings, I think, to kind of help them move forward to, ultimately, I think our big picture goal as a lot of our juniors who know they're interested in college kind of make their way through the second half of junior year is that we would love them to feel like they're going into the summertime pretty much knowing where they want to apply. Now, that list can continue to be fluid. It can be fluid up until a college's latest deadline that they might have over the course of your student's senior year. But I think knowing their list going into the summer gives them a little bit of an opportunity and ownership to then really kind of more meaningfully start the application process for the schools that they've identified they want to apply to. And especially for a lot of our heavily involved current juniors, soon to be seniors, students that might be doing a lot of activities in the fall, might be planning on taking a pretty rigorous schedule of courses as seniors. I think the more that they're able to tackle as far as kind of specific actionable steps with regards to their application, the more manageable I think they'll feel the application process becomes as they kind of make their way through the early part of senior year. So how they go about kind of figuring out some of the things that Mr. Smith mentioned, like how they ultimately go from thinking through what their priorities are to then researching schools based off of those priority lists. We recommend our students use a couple different search engines primarily for a couple of different reasons. In just a minute, we'll walk you through how the Naviance platform works. So all of your students have a Naviance account. Naviance has a pretty user-friendly search component that also has the benefit of collecting past OA applicants to specific colleges. So as your kids and as our students think about fit and work through the process of making sure they're identifying colleges that fit what they're looking for, the opposite side of that coin is that we want to make sure they reasonably feel like their high school experience, their academic profile, and kind of everything else that makes them an applicant to a given school might fit what that particular college is looking for. So Naviance certainly allows that to happen at a micro level where they can perhaps compare their admissions chances based on their academic profile compared to past OA applicant profile. College Board does something similar but on a macro level where they can look at kind of larger admissions data for kind of the entire student profile of acceptances at a given college. So both of those search engines really allow students to kind of research all of those different factors that Mr. Smith was speaking to. And kind of from there, our hope and goal would be that students take that college list that perhaps they start to comprise through some of the search engines, and then work their way to the college's websites directly. And on a college website, students are going to be able to find, I think kind of most importantly, how to visit, engage, and interact with that college to learn more about it. And that's really kind of over the course of the next several months, what we're hoping they're going to be able to do is actually, ideally, get out and set foot on campuses, certainly if the colleges are close enough, and it makes sense for them and for you all to be able to get them onto the college campuses. I feel like for anyone who's already gone through that experience, I think it ends up being really invaluable and helps really crystallize for a lot of kids what their priorities really are. And so colleges really do try and make themselves accessible, and so it is very convenient in many instances to schedule a variety of different ways to visit and interact with the college, both in person and also virtually. So there's a lot of virtual opportunities now, whether it be if your child is looking at or considering schools geographically farther away and logistically it doesn't make sense to necessarily immediately schedule a trip to various parts of the country, then perhaps they might want to start with different virtual, whether it be pre-recorded or live information sessions to really figure out if a particular college ultimately is the right fit for them. And then colleges also maintain a pretty robust social media presence as well. So in the same way that sometimes we remind kids that we want their social media presence to be one that they would be comfortable with perhaps a college admissions counselor researching and seeing and not having reservations with, they too could perhaps follow colleges are interested in just to kind of make sure they are getting kind of timely updates, pieces of information that they ultimately might want to have from a given or particular school. And then Ms. Carney's going to speak to in a little bit, a lot of the resources that we're referencing exist in kind of a variety of different places. I wish this process was more streamlined, but kind of through this process, your kids are going to be introduced to a multitude of different websites. It's not as efficient a process as I think a lot of us would like it to be. And Ms. Carney has done kind of yeoman's work in trying to consolidate a lot of the information that we want our kids to have and you all to have access to through the counseling department website, so that if you're looking for sort of a one-stop shop for like point of reference, a lot of the things we're mentioning and the tools we're kind of directing your students to are going to exist on the OA website. And then lastly, there are a lot of kind of ways to interact and visit with colleges that are farther away for your students while they're closer to home. So specifically, there's a variety of different spring college fairs that take place. Each year, we try and coordinate a trip with our juniors to, in the past has been offered through Bridgewater State University, a regional college fair where there's several hundred colleges, most of them from the Northeast, but some from farther away, where the admissions reps for those schools, the people largely that oftentimes are making the decisions for your particular students, will be there almost in like a middle school science fair type environment where they have their three-sided posters and they're kind of listed alphabetically. And it's a great opportunity for kids to kind of go around and get not only information from colleges, but be able to perhaps ask some questions to the people who work for those colleges who might be able to provide a more kind of accurate and authentic answer to kind of some of the things they're thinking about. And then, like was mentioned, there are other options besides four-year college, and just one of them to highlight is Southeastern Technical High School on the other side of Easton. Also has an adult ed program called Southeastern Technical Institute that has a variety of really, really good quality certificate and training programs. And they are having a few different open houses for several of those programs over the course of next month and the month after, depending on the pathway. So in February, there are several for some of the medical assisting options that exist, and then in March for a lot of the trade options that exist. So as we're meeting with the juniors now, and we have some students that perhaps are indicating their potential career interest doesn't necessitate four-year college, but does require some type of continuing ed or advanced training. This is just one, but a very convenient and cost-effective option that might make sense for a lot of families, especially kind of living where you all live in Easton. So we're going to stop for 1 sec.
So kind of as we go here, we'll stop a few times and I'll show you exactly, if you did use this QR code and you scanned it and typed in a question, I'll show you where it lands. And our goal is to just gather some questions, take a look at them, and between us up here, trying to answer them kind of one by one as they come through. So as I just run through here, will a good SAT score compensate for not the best grades? Often, yes. It's a balancing act when an admissions team at a college is reading your student's application. It's part GPA, it's part SAT or standardized score if they send it, it's part leadership and work experience, it's part their college essay, it's the whole picture. So anytime that a student might be lacking in terms of if their GPA isn't what they want it to be, or their activities isn't as robust as they hoped it would be, the ways to boost your student up, a good SAT score is one of the things that can offset that. Another thing is if they're upping their activities list or taking more rigorous courses and doing well in it in their senior year. So yes, a good SAT score can compensate for not the best grades. Are college tours and college fairs considered excused absences?
Yes.
Yes.
So in senior year, students are allowed 3 excused absences for college visits. In junior year, if you're taking your child on a college visit, and a lot of them are offered on weekends, but a lot of them are Monday through Friday type tour options, we would still encourage and ask you guys to provide the main office documentation that your child was attending a college visit. So in a worst case scenario, there ever was an issue with regards to their attendance and the school's attendance policy, we have that documentation on file.
And just to mention
and the only college fair that does get approved is the Bridgewater State one we take students on as a field trip. That's considered excused because it's a field trip. But otherwise, if you attend a college fair, allow them to have evening hours, so it could be a non-issue, but if you do attend one during the day, it would not be excused. Okay.
It was kind of related to that. How do you get more specific information on college fairs, including virtual ones, locations, and websites? You'll see emails and notices from Ms. Mancuso about specific opportunities that pop up throughout the year. We have student or college reps come into the building during the start of student senior year as well, so that's an important thing to have your student look out for. And then 3, the website will house a lot of that information as well. If you had questions as we go throughout this presentation, we will come back to this and keep addressing them, and we will do it just like this. So again, use that QR code, use the one in your packet, and it should show these responses as we continue forward with the presentation.
So Ms. Carney is going to help me as we do just kind of a quick walkthrough on kind of what the Naviance platform looks like, just so that we have a frame of reference. Forgive us because it may have gotten lost in this process. So as Ms. Carney is pulling it up, this is kind of how the process works for your students. So right now, Naviance is this broad platform, so there is an OA-specific account that your students have login information for. So each of your students has their own unique login. I will say candidly, we walked everyone through a Naviance exercise sophomore year. Many of our students have continued to use Naviance, many have not. So for many students, as we're meeting with them now, we are reminding them how to log into their Naviance accounts. But once they are having their individual meetings with their counselor, they, at that point, should be able to access and log into their Naviance-specific accounts.
I'm noticing more questions coming through, so I'm going to take this opportunity to try to answer them as I can do so. Do you have a list of scholarship opportunities? We'll talk more about financial aid in a few minutes, but scholarship opportunities pop up more so towards your student senior year. Those will be listed in depth on the school website. Again, those are just popping up for current seniors now, so that's like February of their senior year. Those are local Easton scholarships. There are other scholarships outside of Easton. Again, everything we have either gets posted on the Google Classroom we have for your students' class, or the school website, usually both. And I know that if something ever comes across my desk or Ms. Smock's desk, who's the secretary of our department, she'll blast that out to you guys on Parent Square as well. So just keep an eye out. We haven't seen many of them yet, because most of them are tailored towards the seniors. I'll keep going. Do you feel that less colleges are requiring SATs? How important is it that students take them? I think Mrs. Brown is going to get to this part in a minute, but yes, a lot of schools have become SAT optional. It's a little late for me. I was a horrible test taker, and I wish more schools would have been SAT optional when I applied to colleges, because it wasn't a strength of mine. So I really connect with students who struggle through the SAT and getting into schools based on the SAT. There are certain majors like nursing and pre-med and biology that might still require SAT scores. That is a conversation we have with students as well. And I think we're ready.
Yep.
Now, this site should be so good based on the technical difficulties. I feel like this is perhaps not going to live up to the billing at this point. But basically, the way the functionality of it works, you can see there's kind of in the center of the screen, there are several hyperlinks. I would just highlight the Careers tab and the Self-Discovery tab. So we've used resources in both of those sections with our students over the course of freshman and sophomore year. And if your child in particular is someone who is kind of still in that space of like, I think I want to go to college, but I have no idea what I want to study, which is a pretty common space to be in. And as we're meeting with a lot of students, that is a fairly frequent response we hear. There are several very useful career interest inventories that are not super time intensive, I'm thinking 10, 15, 20 minutes, that produce sometimes a helpful list of ideas. Not a singular career per se, but like a variety of different career options based off of either a personality profile, a multiple intelligence inventory, and then it hyperlinks to information about those careers, including a lot of kind of practical information, including job responsibilities, salary information that's kind of factored based on state and national information, so they can see a given career, what they might expect to earn at an entry, median, and kind of max salary level, both within Massachusetts, but also more broadly, as well as then kind of level of education required to pursue certain careers. But kind of more likely than not, most of our students are kind of going at this point to the colleges tab that Ms. Carney is showing you. And kind of functionally, the way the colleges tab works for us is really almost left to right as they're kind of going through the search process. So the tools that are listed in the hyperlinks on the left-hand side of the screen are all search options. And as our kids use Naviance to eventually identify schools, they save them so that we can then see their list and they appear in that colleges I'm thinking about section, and eventually we move those over to the colleges I'm applying to section in the course of their senior year, which is, again, the mechanism that we'll be using to ultimately submit their school information to the colleges they've decided to apply to. But for now, we're going to look at the advanced college search in the Find Your Fit section, which is, like I was mentioning before, just a search engine that has several different hyperlinks. You can kind of see them across the center of the screen, and all of them are clickable, and any given one, kids can use to narrow the list of colleges that might fit what they are looking for, or like we talked about in turn, try and be reasonably confident they fit what the college is looking for. So if we pick location to start, and you can search by region, state, distance from home. If we want to do maybe state, Ms. Carney, and then in the drop-down menu underneath, type in Massachusetts. The kids do not always love when I direct them to look within Massachusetts, but we will be. And then under academics, Again, you can search for a variety of different types of degrees, but largely we're encouraging kids to search for bachelor degree programs. And they can search for specific majors or type in general areas. So if, for example, Ms. Carney, if you even just click on the accounting and finance one, and under admission, we're going to look at schools that are accepting between 26 to 50% and 51 to 75% of the student applicants. If we click off to the side at this point, or close out the search tool, and scroll down a little bit, what's happening is a list of matching colleges is appearing underneath. And the more information your students put into the search engine, the narrower the list of matching colleges will become. What's worth knowing for the majors part of this process specifically is a lot of colleges have very similar but slightly different names for certain majors or degree programs. So one school might have accounting, another school might have accounting and finance, and they may be very similar degrees, but if we're searching specifically for accounting and finance, it might not necessarily include all of the colleges that may ultimately still feel like a good match. And also it will tell us if it's a 100% match or if it's close proximity to a full match, but why it didn't fully fit that criteria, what was included and then what perhaps didn't quite work. Right, so that particular school that Ms. Carney's highlighting is located outside of Massachusetts. It has the other things we're looking for, but not the location. And if Ms. Carney, if you scroll up and we pick, let's go with Salem State.
Do you want to show the different sections?
I think to start, can you click on it? Because I think that's going to take us to a lot of that similar information on the colleges. Kind of once you've identified a college and if the student selects it, what they're going to be able to kind of find in Naviance is typically some kind of quick facts and quick data points about the school that they probably want to have, the college certainly wants them to have. I would note that the average net price that you see on the left, two pieces to it. Oftentimes for public versus private colleges, right, there are kind of public colleges in every state that typically offer two tuition rates, in-state tuition if you live in that state, out-of-state tuition if you live outside the state. The default setting in Naviance is always going to be for the in-state tuition, regardless of the state in which you live. And then also that average net price is adjustable by family income. So I think the default setting is kind of the lowest kind of potential family income, so it looks like the average net price is typically a lot lower than you might expect to see. It also will tell you, as you scroll down a little bit more, Ms. Carney, just some quick highlights about the school, including the overall size of the school, the student to faculty ratio, the average class size, just some quick pieces of information that our kids might want to have, really with the goal of making sure it's somewhere that they do think they want to look a little bit more into. We know initially that the schools came up on this list because they have some type of area of study we're interested in. There is a studies tab that shows all of the potential majors that the college has available, as well as oftentimes some of the more popular general content areas. I think the two sections that I think kids oftentimes are most drawn to are the student life and admissions tabs. So the student life section will tell us some demographic information about the college. How many students go there, the nearest city, and what that city is. One of my personal favorites is how far to the mile it is from Oliver Ames High School. And then how many students live on campus. And the one thing we talk about with a lot of our students is kind of that number oftentimes does not include nearby off-campus housing, right? So you may have a lot of students that aren't necessarily living at home and commuting to the college, but rather are living independently just off campus, but are not necessarily living in university-provided housing. And then as we scroll a little bit further down, it gives us a little bit more of the demographic profile of the student body, including ethnicity, ethnicity, gender, age profile, residency status based on kind of state residency. As you might imagine, in Salem State, the majority of people going there are from Massachusetts. And a small population of people are international students. And then when we look at the admissions tab, this is going to give us that apples-to-apples comparison I was referencing earlier. That it's going to show initially right out of the gate, it's showing us the application fee for that college and also the acceptance rate of that college, the general acceptance rate. But as we scroll down, it's also going to give us, this is OA specific data. So every one of these data points is a student from OA within the last several years that applied to that school and reported back to us the final decision at that college. And the way this works is that their GPA from OA is on the y-axis, which is the one that goes up and down. And then their SAT scores are on the x-axis. Am I saying that wrong? I'm saying that wrong, forgive me. Don't tell my 10th grade math teacher that I just did that. So basically how it would work is that they can kind of look at their GPA and run across, and if their GPA is at, or above anyone with a green check mark, it means they have a stronger GPA or a similar GPA to other people from OA in the past that were accepted to that school. And the same is true with regards to test scores. Specifically, it defaults to SAT test scores. As your students eventually take the PSATs and the SATs, they will appear as a silhouette of a person, like a little silhouette picture that Ms. Carney's highlighting on the left there, within the scattergrams. And the one thing that I would note is the scattergrams don't differentiate how the students apply. So Mr. Smith mentioned that I think we started to talk about test optional colleges, and Ms. Carney's going to speak to that a little bit more in just a minute. But it doesn't tell us if the students ultimately chose to send test scores or not to a given college relative to their admissions decisions. The other thing that Salem State doesn't necessarily have in their scattergram, but we oftentimes see in some of the scattergrams, is we do have some students that were waitlisted at colleges. The college basically could say yes, they could say no, and sometimes they say maybe, and ultimately don't let students or notify students until the summer, typically after they graduate, what the final decision is. And by that point, students that have reported back to us their decisions have graduated, and we don't always know those final decisions. So as students are looking at the scattergrams, they'll oftentimes see acceptances, they may see rejections, and they also may see those waitlist designations as well. And this is just a piece of every one of these is a student that has a more holistic profile, and it doesn't include a lot of the other factors that a college would be considering when evaluating their application. But it certainly is worth knowing that the academic profile of a student is one of the first things the colleges will look at. And so we want to make sure that, at least reasonably speaking, our students have some level of confidence that they're academically in a range that makes that particular school they're considering a good match. Okay? So we can actually probably jump back to the PowerPoint. And as we're doing that, we're not going to show you the College Board one in the interest of time, but College Board has a very similar search engine. I think for a lot of our students that are like in the early phase of this process, this is where we're directing them. We want them to kind of use some of these search tools to generate a list of colleges that ultimately feels like a good fit. And then from there, we really want them to go from those websites to the college sites directly to gather more information before ultimately trying to, like we talked about before, kind of ultimately get on the campuses or interact or engage with the colleges as intentionally and directly as possible to ultimately learn as much about that college as is reasonable for them to kind of gather over the next several months. And as they go through this process, ultimately, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what the actual application process looks like. But part of that process includes recommendation letters that are going to be submitted on their behalf. And students are going to ultimately receive recommendation letters from each of us. Their counselors are going to write recommendation letters for them, and we'll encourage them and ultimately, oftentimes, help facilitate them getting recommendation letters from teachers as well. For us counselors, we each have a caseload of many students, and we're writing a lot of these recommendation letters in close proximity. And while we know all of your students, and I'd like to think we know them very well, we would never claim to know everything about their high school experience, or perhaps everything that they might want mentioned in a recommendation letter being sent on their behalf. So we use a couple of different tools to try and make sure when we go to write our letters of recommendation, we have all the information that you and your students would want us to have. So we have a college questionnaire that we're sharing out with your students that has a series of about 12 questions. It's not terribly long, but it is meant to be really helpful for us to make sure we have all the background that students would want to share with us about their high school experience. And then because we know sometimes students have this amazing gift to take like open-ended questions and make them like yes or no responses. We also have a parent brag sheet because sometimes parents are able to provide us a lot more information, things that we never would have known about had you not all shared with us. And sometimes, I know in the past we've gotten parent brag sheets from families with anecdotes, small examples that highlight a larger point that are really helpful for us in kind of drafting a letter to really show how wonderful our students and your children are. So we require students fill out the student brag sheet, the student questionnaire. We ask that you all, we don't require you guys to do it, but if you could and are willing to, both are really, really useful tools for us in writing our letters. And we share out, and we're sharing out the student questionnaire kind of in real time as we're meeting with students. The parent brag sheet is being shared in May. And so what's that? So it'll come out through Parent Square. And if you are willing at that time to kind of fill it out and ultimately submit it back to us, it does really become a very useful, helpful tool in the letter writing part of the process for us. And with that is kind of my impassioned plea to get you all to fill out the parent brag sheet. I'm going to pass it along to Ms. Carney, who's going to talk a little bit about the OA website and then standardized testing.
The most exciting portion of this evening. I know you're all waiting with bated breath. Standardized tests, it's the best. So we just wanted to take this moment to highlight for you our school website, which, I'm trying to look for it. Oh, there it is. Sorry, it was hiding on me. We wanted to just kind of bring you to it so you could take a quick look and see. There's lots of information on here, but when you get here, over here on the right-hand side is a college planning and testing section. And a lot of these links to finding both Naviance and, we have others in here, College Board's Big Future, the one we were talking about, but also some of these others as well as specialty searches like navigating the process for students with learning disabilities or differences, schools that don't require SATs or ACTs, historically black colleges, things like that. So there's a lot of good information on here. Also, when the time comes, which will probably be about, this time next year, there is a whole scholarships and financial aid section as well. And that is also where we will be posting our Oliver Ames specific scholarships. We will do that towards the end of the school year next year for your seniors. And that's something that's definitely important, and you'll want your kids to go to that. So standardized tests, the fun. What is the difference? So SAT is based out of Princeton, New Jersey. So they did a really good job of selling SATs to the Northeast. So Northeast loves SATs. You go to the South, you go to the West Coast, they're more ACT people. We always joke it's like Visa, MasterCard. They're both taken everywhere. You can take whatever you'd like. The ACT does have a science section, but it's not hugely, you don't have to be a science expert to be able to do it. It's oftentimes just, understanding that you know reason and logic and things like that. So it's really whatever you like. Most of the time in the Northeast here, we have probably more test prep for SAT, but you will find organizations that will do ACT as well. So whatever works for you. Should I take both? The students don't need to. I don't think anybody up here is recommending tons of standardized test taking, especially nowadays where so many colleges have gone test optional. I don't think you need to make yourself crazy about it. Usually our kind of saying is, pick a test, prep for it, take it twice. Because schools will super score, so if a kid does better on the reading, writing on one and better in math on the other, if you send both those scores, they will take those higher scores and create a super score out of it. And they do that for both exams. So, it's statistically, after 3 times taking an exam, your score is not going to change. And we've seen that where kids are like, taking it 3, 4 times and it's not changing. So save yourselves the ajna and the kids' Saturday mornings, and just, try to dial it down definitely. Also, because so many schools are test optional now, it just makes it easier. I know one of the questions was, will that offset a low GPA? And it will, as Mr. Smith was saying. But don't make yourself crazy in trying to do that. And if your kid's not a standardized test taker, like Mr. Smith said he wasn't, I definitely was not. Mine was terrible. But it's okay to let it go. The majority of our students who applied last year applied test optional. So sit with that a little, it's okay. We can all let it go. I knew we all grew up thinking you had to take it, it had to be the best. It's not that way anymore. How are they used by schools? Mr. Smith had kind of referred to that. He was probably the best person because he's worked in admissions before. But it's just one little component to the overall picture. And again, some schools won't even look at them, so you don't even have to worry about in that situation. When do you send them to school? So this is something that's important for you guys to know because I think this gets confused every single year. Your student, or you, are sending those scores. I think sometimes every year people get confused and think guidance is sending those scores. We're not. We don't have access to your students' College Board accounts, so sometimes kids will come, they're like, I'm locked out of my College Board account. We're like, oh geez, we better call College Board because we don't have access, we can't get in. We can see their score reports after the fact, but we cannot get into their accounts, we can't reset their accounts, and we cannot officially send their scores. Schools will consider it official scores if it's sent from College Board or ACT directly to their institution. So that will be part of the process that your student has to make sure they send the scores before the deadlines, whatever those deadlines are. And what's the difference between test optional and test blind? Like I said, test blind, they're not looking at it. Test optional, it's up to you if you'd like to send them. The College Board search engine has a really good thing, as Mr. Fitz was talking about, where you can see it really specifically. If you look under their admissions, it will show you the average SAT and ACT score for colleges. So your student can go in there and take a look and look at what their score is. If it falls within that little bar of the average accepted student, then send your scores. If you're underneath it, then you don't send it. It's a pretty good rule of thumb. So go into College Board's college search engine to do that. College Board, the SATs, this is where you go to register for it. If your child did take PSATs, they do have an account. PSATs, you registered through our office. You went on, did the town online paying. But to take the SAT, you're registering through their website. You're applying directly to them. The Oliver Ames hosts in May, and we do in November, though we might change that next fall. Potentially, we might change that. I guess College Board's thinking about doing a September test. We might do that, we're not sure yet. But typically, we host in May and November. Some students will take it, twice the spring of their junior year. Some will take it once their junior year, once the beginning of their senior year. It's all what works for you and your child. You go there, you fill out the information, and it is a little long, to be honest. Some of it's just marketing information that they're gathering from you. Don't get too stressed about that stuff. But at the end, you're going to put in the zip code, and it's going to tell you what schools host closest to you. The next upcoming SATs, there's a March exam. May, like I said, is here. I would register soon if you want the May, because we do eventually fill up. And in the past, we have had situations where we've had outside kids taking tests here, and our kids had to go to some other high school. Usually, they don't have to go too far. Usually, they're somewhere in the vicinity, like Mansfield's having it, Stoughton's having it, someone else is having it. June is the last one for the end of this year, and then there is an August exam, but the August exams are few and far between because staff members have to come back from vacation to proctor them, and I don't think a lot of schools have gotten people to do that. So if you're planning on that August exam, during the summer, keep searching to when they release it to try to get someplace nearby. I've had kids who've had to like leave state or go hours away to be able to take that exam. And like I said, we'll cross our fingers, maybe there'll be a September exam. In the fall, it's in October, November, December. And it's 2 sections with the 3 tests of reading, math, writing, and language. There is no essay anymore, and so the max score is 800 per section, so 1,600 overall. ACT, multiple choice. It's interesting because actually SAT over the years changed to be more like ACT. They're very similar at this point. There is an optional writing section for ACT. The pricing is very similar, and the upcoming dates for the ACT are February 8th, April 5th, June 12th, and July 12th. ACT, it's actstudent.org, that website, to be able to register for the ACT. Test prep. So we do typically recommend doing some kind of test prep. Khan Academy is the official test prep for the College Board, for the SAT. It is free. If your student took the PSAT, it will actually customize it based on their answers to that exam to help them focus on the areas that they were weak in. It is an excellent way for kids to prep if they are a self-motivated kind of kid. I can tell you I raised 2 boys who were not self-motivated kind of kids. They needed to have somebody pointing at a book in front of them to encourage them to move on. At Bridgewater State, they have a class. And so it runs typically on Sundays. It starts a couple months before an exam, and it's got a teacher and a book, and it leads up to that exam. And it's about $325, so not too bad. ACT also has an online course that's about $40. Princeton Review, Kaplan, private tutors, they're all going to run you a lot more money. We know some students have done that. We don't know any particular ones if you're looking, because we don't really deal with that, but I'm sure if you reach out to your Easton Moms sites or whatever, somebody can recommend things like that if you're looking for that. And then I think I'm going over to Ms. Brown.
Okay, so I'll talk to you guys a little bit about the actual application piece of applying to college. So there's different ways that your student is going to be able to put their application into the colleges. The main one I would say that is used by most students is actually the middle one right there, the common application. I guess the way I kind of talk about the common application is it's kind of like the Indeed, right, Indeed.com of the college application world, where like if you can put all your information in one place, your name, your address, everything, right, all of it, kind of in one neat little website, and then kind of fire it off to the different colleges. That's essentially what the common application is, right? I always tell my students, like, I applied to college before you were born, so I was using a paper application, and I was writing my name and writing my address and mailing it out to the colleges again and again and again, right? So they only have to put all that in one time. It's not particularly challenging, right? It's kind of their basic information. So there's a section for their profile, their name, address, for demographic information. There's some information about you and your education level, things like that. There's education about the classes they took at OAHS, if they took any college classes, their honors that they got. They can put their test scores, like their AP scores in there, things like that. They can put their activity section. That's a big part of it. That's one that I talk to my juniors. I spend a little bit more time talking to them about, because you can put 10 activities on the Common App. For some students, they're trying to kind of stretch to 10, or you don't have to put 10, right? You can put as many as you want. Some of them are like, how do I manage 10? I have like 30 things that I do, and how do I, squeeze all that in? And then for each section, it's kind of like, I guess the example I give is I talk about, cross country. So if you do cross country, colleges know what you do. You run, right? You run competitively. So there's, a little section where you have 150 characters, that's just a couple sentences if you're wondering, to explain more about what you did in cross country. So I encourage students to really start thinking about their experiences, right? Like, how did you demonstrate leadership? Official, if you were voted captain, or unofficial leadership. How many, did you get any recognitions, awards, win competitions, things like that? And it's harder than you think to sum that up in 150 characters. So that's something I encourage them to start kind of thinking and reflecting on, over the summer and things like that, is putting their experiences together so they can start figuring out how to really highlight that in the best way in their common application. And then there's also the essay, the writing sample that goes in. It's up to 650 words. It's the big college essay, if that's what you've heard about before. And it's exciting and overwhelming, and it's a lot of things for the kids because you can write about anything, literally anything, right? It's just kind of cool, and I have a lot of conversations with students about this, and I'm sure we all do, about what do I write about, and how do I make myself sound like the world's most interesting 17-year-old that's ever existed, and, it's not as much pressure. They all get it done, and they do a great job with it, but, so Common Application is that website that they would use. We encourage them to register for that. We're talking about it now, right? So, register for it. I encourage by the spring, by the end of the school year, to look at it and get on the website and start kind of understanding what it is that you're going to be doing and filling out. They can start working on it over the spring and summer. It does reset every August 1st. So like if you logged in right now, you would see all the deadlines for this current year, right? All the college deadlines. And August 1st, that will reset to have next year's deadlines so they can see that. But most of what they put in there would stay. They might have to, they started a prompt for a school that, a school might have a specific question that they want you to answer. If they start working on that this year, it might be gone because it might change for next year. But most of their basic information would still be there. They might apply directly to a college's website. Sometimes if they go for a visit, the college might say, here's a code, and if you apply on our website, you can get this, you can apply for free there. But, again, everything in kind of one place. There's over 1,000 colleges that use Common Application, so it's pretty easy to just put it all in there and just kind of fire it off to each school. There's another app called the Coalition Application. It's not something we see as much, but it exists. And it's used by a smaller number of schools, but similar to the Common Application. This is just what the Common App looks like, kind of the landing page for it. So again, if they register, they want to register as a first-year student, of course. And we encourage them to use a personal email address, just because sometimes we find that with school email addresses, there might be like a filter, like a web filter or something that might block an email from a college, and obviously we want them getting the emails from the colleges. So, they can register as a first-year applicant there. And we're also going to do a Common App workshop in the summer. So we usually do, it's a free, obviously free, it's run by this department right here, 2-day workshop where we'll just make ourselves available, and we're happy to sit down with your students and look over any work that they've done and answer any questions they have so that they can, I think ideally what we're talking about is them getting familiar with it now, maybe starting to kind of chip away at that, and then saving their questions for us, coming back in August, and we can help them really walk into the year feeling like they understand the application and have made some pretty good progress with that, and like they're getting ready to apply, right, whenever their applications are coming up. Okay, so I'll talk to you guys a little bit about, I know it was mentioned before, like the different decisions and deadlines, so I just want to kind of explain it, and I think we're going to talk about it again when we do our senior session in the fall, because it's a big thing, right? So we're happy to kind of keep explaining what this means. So there's two like most common types of deadlines. There's early and regular, and then for early there's kind of two different types. So an early deadline is typically November 1st, November 15th. Those are the most common ones. Some southern schools might be in October, which we love. We love sending everything right in October. But no, so like October, November, something like that, maybe a December 1st. It's nice to apply early because you get the applications in early, you get the answers early, the decisions. I love telling my students it's so nice to be able to walk into your holiday family party and say, yep, I got here and here and here, because everyone's going to be asking. So it's nice just to have kind of that peace of mind walking into that winter break, knowing that you've already gotten some acceptances. And then, so early action and early decision, what are the differences between those two? So early decision, you only apply to one school early decision because that is a binding application. So that means if you apply to that one school because it is your dream school, right? You've been to the campus, you know it's perfect, they have the major that you want, you just love everything about this school, financially, it's a good fit because you don't know what this college is going to give you in terms of aid, anything like that, right? But so you want to feel comfortable knowing that just through and through that this college is a really awesome choice for you. competitive applicant because they know that if they admit you, you have to go there. It's legally binding. You have to withdraw any other applications that you might have put in and attend that college, right? So it's a big commitment, but obviously high risk, high reward. If it's a college that really is perfect for you, then that could give you a nice competitive edge. Early action is not binding, so you can apply to many schools early action, you can get into many schools early action, and you don't have to go to any of them. It's just getting that application in early so that you can get that decision early. And then there's regular decision. Typically, the most common deadlines for that might be January 1st, January 15th, February 1st, February 15th, something like that. Some students like that because it gives them a little more time to work on their application, right? They have time to make sure everything's ready. They might want to get some of their grades up a little bit higher. Maybe they're not where they want to be, so this gives them a chance to kind of just focus on senior year a little bit while, slowly working on their application with a little bit more time. And then they might get their decision in March, potentially early April. So there's kind of, you can see there's benefits to both. You don't have to do one or the other. It's not early or regular. You can do all early. You can do all regular. You can do a little bit of both. It's going to be whatever's right for your student. And again, logging into Common App is nice because after August 1st, you'll be able to see what each college's deadlines are and just kind of have those conversations about what's going to be right for your student. There's another type of admissions deadline. It's rolling admissions. This is something that is typically for schools. They tend to have like pretty high acceptance rates and almost like not open admissions, but like pretty high acceptance rates. And their deadlines are in maybe July, so you can apply almost right up to the time when class is about to start. We don't recommend waiting until then because it's kind of late, but it's a thing. So we like to, I would say, try to have your applications in by February break is pretty good to aim for because decision day, as they call it, is May 1st, pretty universally, pretty typically, that colleges say you have until May 1st to put your deposit down and be committed to that school. So, I mean, again, a lot of our students apply early here, and I think the advantages are that you have more time. You have more time to get your acceptances, to go visit the campus again, and really just make that most informed decision. There's a lot of options. Okay, and so I think we're back to questions, and then Ms. Mancuso.
Just a couple of things to mention. So as I said earlier tonight, we will send out a copy of this PowerPoint with the hyperlinks. I'll also include a hyperlink to NACAC. It's the National Association of College Admissions Counseling. And they're the ones that usually handle all of the college fairs, the virtual ones, the Boston, Providence. So if you're looking for more information that way, you can go on that NACAC website. I'll also be sending out tomorrow with the PowerPoint some handouts. One is a college counseling handbook. One is a handout that talks about SAT versus ACT and includes all the dates and deadlines and along with some links for test prep. And then I'll also send one that includes questions you can ask on a college tour when you visit. So that'll be really helpful as well. So I just want to put that out there. In addition to the individual counseling we're doing right now with the juniors, we're also going to be doing some group work with them towards the end of January, beginning of February during age blocks. We think repetition is key, so a lot of times we'll go back in again and have them do a lot of these exercises just to keep it fresh in their mind. And then we do meet with them again in May before they leave, just to do a wrap up for the year, see where they're at, and talk about next steps into summer and fall, which will include conversations on letters of recommendation, deadlines, the Common App, things like that. So let me jump back over to questions. Okay, so we did talk about this one. Do you feel that less colleges are requiring SATs? How important is it that students take them? Yes, and on the whole, a lot of them are test optional. And when we say that, if your student decides not to send, it really is no penalty to them, okay? And again, some of them are test blind, which means they won't even look at test scores at all. Stonehill College, for example, is test blind. So again, if your student falls into that range and they scored well in what that college is looking for or higher, sure, send them. It's a feather in their cap. But again, if they don't like their scores and they're not feeling great about it, don't send it. It's not going to be an issue. Is it still a factor in the process? If they send it, yes. If they don't send them, it's not factored into their admissions process. Having said that, we still encourage students to take them just to see how they do, because some students are strong test takers and it might be to their advantage And as that earlier question was asked, if they do have a lower GPA, then maybe that SAT score may help offset that, okay? Will there be any other colleges visiting OA similar to UMass Amherst? Yes, so every fall we work with admissions reps to have them come into the building, and it's usually September through December that they come in during each block. And sometimes we have up to 4 or 5 colleges coming in at a time. Students have the opportunity to sign up through MyFlex and meet with those reps. And we get a broad range. I will say IVs don't usually come because they don't typically come out to schools, they don't have to, but we do get a broad range of schools anywhere from New York, Pennsylvania, New England, sometimes New Jersey coming in. So every year it varies a little bit. We have a lot of schools that traditionally come annually, and then every once in a while we're trying to work with some new schools to come in as well. But we do get a broad range of options of schools coming in. Sorry, it keeps closing me up. Let's fix that. Does the school send class rank to school? Does OA send class rank to schools even if students don't know theirs? We do not. So with this last graduating class, we didn't send rank. We also are required to submit a school profile to colleges with all of student information. And within that, we explained our policy change that we do not rank. We can provide a percentile if necessary, if a college really feels like they need something. But I will say with this last round with our students last year, we didn't run into any issues. It wasn't problematic. I think it's an industry standard moving away from using rank. In talking to a lot of other high schools and talking with admissions reps when we were trying to decide on this, they would just say, again, it's like the SATs, they would just say, that's not a penalty to students if you as a school have chosen not to rank, we just don't factor it. And I think they're seeing more schools moving away from using rank, so no, we don't provide a rank to the colleges. And then, does OA conduct career aptitude tests to help narrow down career and or college search? So we do, in different ways. So for example, we met with the freshmen not long ago, we had them do a personality assessment. But based on that information, it suggested careers that match their personality, which then ties into the conversation of what sort of education or training would they need for those types of jobs. This year, when we meet with sophomores, we are doing a career interest inventory to, again, try to match them up with potential careers that match their interests, and again, what kind of training or education that would require. Sometimes we have students by senior year who are still struggling and can't figure out what they want to do. We can do further career aptitude testing with them individually to see if that might help with something. But just, you know, we do some assessments along the way that get them thinking about what they want to do. They also do it in the 8th grade during their health classes. They also do a career assessment then as well. So we are getting it bit by bit in time. In the hopes that they are starting to develop ideas. Maybe not specific careers, but at least pathways that they want to pursue. Okay. Okay. All right, so we're going to jump over to the last section and then we'll wrap up with further questions. Okay. Financial aid with, who's doing financial aid? Me? Okay, thanks guys. Okay, so FAFSA. FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. So this is if you as a family want any type of financial aid whatsoever. It's free, it's through the federal government. This is how you are going to get the bulk of your financial aid to pay for college. Okay, scholarships are great, merit aid is great, I'll explain what that is. But on the whole, you will fill out a FAFSA, okay, in the fall. Your student will also fill out a FAFSA. It's based on tax information only. From there, the federal government does their calculations and determines what they think you as a family can afford for college. You'll list all the schools you're applying to, the students applying to. Colleges will then look at that financial aid information and put together a package. They try to meet that need as best they can. So for example, let's say a school is $50,000. FAFSA determines you need to come up with $10,000 on your own. The college will then try to come up with that $40,000 difference for you. That can be in the form of grants, scholarship, work study, that's free money. Loans, there's things that's called subsidized and unsubsidized loans. When you get that financial aid package, you can look at it, decide if you want to accept all that they're offering you, or just some of what they're offering you. So it's not an all or nothing situation with the financial aid package, okay? Unfortunately, FAFSA has to be done every year that your child attends college, okay? So if they're going to a four-year school, you'll do this every year, you'll become a pro. But if your student is eligible, when they receive their acceptance letter, the acceptance letter might also include something saying, congratulations, that your child is also eligible for a $10,000, scholarship. That's considered merit money. Just based on their academic profile, that alone made them eligible potentially for some merit money that would be free as well, okay? And it will tell you if it's good for 4 years, 1 year, whatever it might be, okay? And it has varied. So FAFSA changed they overhauled their whole format a year ago. It was a hot mess, and it was pushed it didn't open until December 31st, when in years past it used to open on October 1st. This year, it opened December 10th, I believe. So we will wait and see next year when they open. I think the goal is to have them open October 1st, but it may not be till December. But we try to send out notices to you guys of when it's actually going to be available, okay? We're kind of at the mercy of the federal government, unfortunately, on that one. But colleges are also aware. They're very much in the loop and know that's the situation, okay? The CSS profile. So in addition to the FAFSA, some private institutions will also ask for another financial aid form called the CSS profile. This one is through College Board, and they charge you for it. Again, it's not every school, it's just some of the private institutions. They're more expensive, they may have more money to provide students, so they're going to ask more questions beyond your tax information. I always say they're very nosy. They like to get into the nitty-gritty and get a broader sense of your financial picture. Again, they may have more money to offer, so they really want to ask more questions to get a better understanding. That one always opens starting October 1st, okay? So at that point, you can log in through your student's College Board account and start filling out that CSS profile. You can even Google CSS profile, and it will list the schools that require that form. If you're not sure, you can reach out to us and we can let you know if your student would need it or not. And we will go back to, we'll be resuming in-person financial aid nights. A lot of things were on hold with COVID, and then for a while things switched to virtual, but we plan to be back in person in the fall with a presenter from MIFA, the Massachusetts Education Finance Authority. And we will have someone come in who's a financial expert and kind of explain and walk through the FAFSA a little bit with you. MIFA also has opportunities if you want to do virtual webinars. They also do something called FAFSA Festival. That's usually in January, so it'd be January 2026, where you can register and virtually work with an individual financial aid officer who can help you fill out the FAFSA. And we also have free resources in the community. There's one in particular in Brockton where if a family's like, look, we got this crazy situation, we got a lot of things going on, how do I fill this out? You can meet with them for free and they can assist you with that process too. So there'll be a lot of information pushed out to you guys, but that piece will really happen more in the fall. There's nothing you need to really worry about right now. Okay, so what now? We just keep telling the kids this is really the big research time. So between now and the end of the year, continue to keep the grades up, continue to research schools, have conversations with you guys to understand what they're considering. We want everyone to be on the same page in terms of financially what works for families and what their plan is. If a child's saying, I want to go to California, and you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We have to have that conversation. We always tell kids, have those talks now. It's really helpful so everyone's on the same page. Start scheduling SAT or SAT testing, just maybe to get that first one done in the spring. One thing to mention, there is a June SAT, but it is the same day as OA graduation. So if anyone was planning on going, it's a conflict on that June test date. And then in May, research, visit colleges. Again, the best way to really know if a student's gonna like a college is setting foot on campus, right? You try not to buy a car without test driving it. Same thing with a college. Understandably, some of them might be too far away, so the next best option would be a virtual tour, okay? But we definitely encourage the students to try to connect with the colleges they're interested in some form. A tour, sending an email, requesting information, following them on Instagram. They don't have to do all those things, but even one thing would be good because schools use something called demonstrated interest. Again, a lot of your competitive schools may not use this, but many other schools do, which means when they're reviewing your student's application, they will take note. Oh, Joe came and took a tour with us. Oh, that's wonderful. You know, that really might make a difference, especially in comparison to another school, a student with a similar profile who maybe didn't connect with the school in any way, shape, or form. So definitely try to connect in some fashion. And then in May, we asked the students to reach out to teachers asking for letters of recommendation. It doesn't have to happen now. May is a good time. We ask the students, please ask in person. Hey, Mr. Souza, I'm applying to college. Would you consider writing me a letter of recommendation? Mr. Souza may say, yep, happy to do it. If there's anything more that teacher needs from your child or they have any questions, they'll let them know. Otherwise, when we reconvene in the fall, we just pick up where we left off and we will show the students how to invite or add those teachers into their Naviance accounts. Okay, that'll be that's part 2 of our presentation. But this way they've had the conversation and they're on the radar with the teacher, okay? Preferably academic teachers. You know, I think it doesn't matter what subject. I mean, obviously if they're thinking a STEM field, a science or math teacher is lovely, but all teachers do a great job, you know? So as long as it's a teacher who knows your child well, maybe they had them a couple of times, maybe it was a class they struggled with but really persevered and the student loved the class, that's great too. So we want them to just start thinking about at least 2 teachers to ask for letters of recommendation. And then over the summer, again, continue to visit colleges if you can, you know, create that Common App account, and then, you know, we right here begin drafting essays. Even if they can just start thinking about a topic would be helpful. Common App has 7 writing prompts. You can Google it, it'll bring up all 7 options, and maybe they can start thinking about what they want to write. And then in the fall, the English teachers will work with your student on an essay. Now, the teachers all vary. They may make it an actual assignment they have to do in class. Some of the teachers may just discuss the writing prompts and talk it over with kids and then say, you know, schedule a conference with me and I'll critique your essay, but they have a point of contact with their English teachers. Okay? And then in the fall, we'll come back and hit the ground running. We'll have a parent night, we start meeting individually, we start figuring out who wants to apply early, who doesn't, who still isn't sure what they want to do at all, and we go from there. And then of course, later in the fall will be the financial aid process. Okay? So I think we have a few more questions to tap into.
All right, I'm getting to the last of the questions that I got on the QR code, and then we'll just ask questions the regular way. I have 2 questions related to Naviance. One being, does the net price include room and board? Typically, yes. I'm going to pull up just a Naviance account just to take a look with you here. So what we're referencing here is the scatter plot. And I have 2 really good questions about how Naviance is used. Question 1 was about how the scatter plot is used. So that was the one Mr. Fitzgerald was talking about with his SAT on the y-axis versus the GPA on the x-axis. There you go, I got it right, I think. And so your student will have access to this, and it's a really good tool to use to indicate what are my chances at this school. A lot of students will say, Mr. Smith, give me a percentage. What are the chances I get into this school? And there's no exact percent I can give them other than show them the data for the last 5 years. And so one of the questions that came in on the QR code was, do these graphs exist for like a student who wants to study nursing versus a student who wants to study business? Because a lot of times the GPA requirement of those admissions are different from school to school. It's a really insightful question, so thank you for whoever asked it. No, though, Naviance does not allow for the differentiation between those things. It's just overall GPA versus what the school typically has accepted on record-wise from Oliver Ames.
And that explains sometimes the wonky thing. So sometimes you'll see a really high red X, and a lot of times that can be like a nursing major because it's a small major, and it's usually a high selective major. So you could have kids with great grades and scores who don't get in, and then sometimes you have these lower green check marks. So sometimes, and it's also a 5-year look back, so we're counting into COVID with that. So that can explain some of the disparity in some of that. So it's not a perfect science.
Another question about Naviance, about the net price, breaking down the price of tuition versus the price of room and board, and average net price. So deeper as you get into Naviance, you can see the breakdown between the different categories. So really getting into this tool is really helpful. Another question, can you talk about the importance of activities in the college application? Is there a certain number of activities that students should try to have? The Common App limits you to 10 activities. And so what colleges want to see for the most part is, they don't want to see the student who has 9 activities they suddenly added at the start of their senior year. They know when students do that. They want to see continued interest in stuff that the student likes. So if the student joins the debate club but hates debate, it comes through on the application. So I encourage students to use their summers especially effectively. Like, yes, we know you can join the business club, or I always encourage the academic club, but college should also value a student who works and who holds a schedule and who puts in 15 hours a week and is responsible to a boss and regular hours. Like, that stuff matters. The student who babysits, that counts too. And of course, any classes you take outside of all of our aims, volunteer work that you do, sports. Club sports are one thing, OA sports are a second thing, so you can differentiate within activities like that as well. But 10 is the maximum number that they allow reported on the Common App, although students find other ways to weave in interests in their own college essay or in other places within the application as well. Great last question here. How much time do counselors need to complete their reference letter? My ballpark is, I would usually like to have the information from the student, so like the student questionnaire sheet that was referenced earlier and the parent brag sheet. If I can get both of them roughly 3 weeks prior to the student's deadline, that usually is enough time for me. So say that early deadline, like Ms. Brown referenced, was November 1st. I'm going to need that information early to write. We typically write anywhere between 50 and 60 some odd letters, so it's a lot, and the sooner we get that stuff, the better. And of course, the student who's like, Mr. Smith, my deadline is tomorrow, here's my form. I'm like, oh my God, okay, I'll try my best. And they come out well. We do have situations like that, and it works out in the end, but the more prep your student can be, the easier it is. And honestly, it provides the most impactful letter we can when we have the most information available. That's all the QR code questions. Do we have any questions the regular way? Do we do many international applications? On and off throughout the years. I have a student currently in Canada. That's one. And 2 students 2 years ago went over to Europe. I don't know.
I had 2 students last year apply to schools in England, and they attended. I have a student applying to Denmark. I have a student currently who's exploring the UK. So we do work with those kiddos. If they're interested, yes, we've had Canada, we had Barbados. It was an island somewhere. But we do work with them on what courses they need for those schools, their timeline, things like that.
To that point, I would just add that if your child is in a situation like that, with a more perhaps unique kind of post-secondary goal, the earlier we're having that conversation, the better. Because candidly, while we have students that do it, and we certainly will research and support them through the process, we're not going to be automatically as knowledgeable about the application process too. For example, I was working with a student yesterday, meeting with a junior, and I said, thoughts and plans. My mom wants me to go to school somewhere where she can drive, but I want to go to school in Korea. And I said, oh, and what do you know about college in Korea? And she goes, nothing. And I was like, okay, well, step 1 is going to be talking to mom. And then step 2 is we need to figure out if that is actually something you're going to do, what that process looks like, because I do not know what that process looks like either right now. So if you do have a student that wants to do something more unique than perhaps the process of applying to colleges in the United States, and certainly applying to colleges in the Northeast, simply kind of looping us into that conversation as early as possible will help kind of make sure we're not missing deadlines, missing requirements, and kind of everyone who's going to be submitting information for your student kind of knows what they need to do and when they need to do it by.
I believe there are other questions that were on Did you have a question?
While Mr. Smith is looking them up, one thing I would highlight just on the price part of it, an added tool that exists on colleges' websites is a tool called a net price calculator. So a net price calculator is something that was required of colleges by the federal government several years back, and typically the tool exists on the college's financial aid portion of their website. And what it allows you to do is enter a lot of the information that the FAFSA is going to require of you, as well as your child's academic information, and it gives you a fairly accurate sense of what the financial aid offer your child would be likely to receive from that school. It's not guaranteed. They make like multiple disclaimer points. A point to communicate this is not a guarantee, nor does it guarantee admission, but it does give you a little bit more of an accurate sense about what your child would probably see from, as far as the financial aid offer is concerned, if you are comfortable kind of preemptively or proactively entering the information that you're ultimately going to need to enter, or your child's going to need to enter to get a financial aid offer.
Thank you for pointing these out. 3 more questions that we missed. Number 1, why do early decision when you can do early action? At least you are not bound legally. What is the real advantage of early decision? We make the same points a lot in our conversations. Early action and early decision are both things that in the past have been like small percentage points to help you, like you're a little bit more likely to get in because you're showing a higher level of commitment to the school. So early decision is like a binding, this is my place and my spot and I'm committing to you. And the thought is that colleges would reward that. It's only a small fraction of a help, but it is a help. And so for students looking for a leg up in that way, and they know that that school is the one, and usually when money isn't the biggest concern at the forefront of the conversation, early decision becomes a little more palpable or a little more likely to help. Early action, we recommend it everywhere to everyone across the board because there is no binding piece to it. Just you find it earlier, you get a result earlier, it's off your shoulders earlier. So we tend to really be critical when students say, I want early decision, and we try to vet to make sure, like, are you sure this is it? Are you sure your parents know what is coming with this financially and all? So it's something we don't use as often. Early action is much more regular. Yeah, athletes are different. If you have a student who's interested in athletics, that could be a whole different conversation around decision versus action. Second question, should students also get recommendation letters from their employers? It can help. Primarily what colleges want to see is a teacher who's seen you in an academic space, ideally math, science, history, English, vouch for your academic abilities in that space. And so those are the ones we prioritize. Now obviously athletes, like coaches, trainers, sometimes have really valuable insight on that student. Same with employers. The only one college you really never want to see is like a parent. Sorry, they don't want to see a letter from you about your student. Oh, the max letter of recommendations, I mean, typically it's 2 letters from your teacher, from teachers at school. Most colleges won't allow anything more than 2 to 3. So some colleges won't allow any at all, but usually the employer or a coach or an extra letter gets cut from the equation because most colleges max out around 2 letters or so.
In the Common App, there is a section for other recommenders, but it's based on the college. So your kid, once they've figured out what colleges they want to go to and they've added them to their Common App, they can see in there if they will accept letters from outside people.
And then this question I have to answer. Does tuition include a bottle of wine? The bill for most tuition, that first tuition bill hits in August when your student's leaving for college. It's probably the moment you want that for. But
I can tell you, I'm friends with the admission rep from Mass Bay Community College, and she said August is her busiest time because that is when the bills come due. And as somebody who's had one kid graduate college and the other's in there, a bill comes due. I think sometimes we like to think theoretically about what this money means, and we're thinking scholarships and financial aid and all this kind of stuff, but eventually a bill comes. And so, having those real conversations, really thinking about how much that means coming, out of pocket or loans and what that means in the long run is important.
One thing real quick is One of the added benefits of kind of going through the search process currently and eventually the application process, if your kids are able to, leading into senior year, is it does then give them and you more time to not only sit with the financial aid offers you're receiving from the colleges, but also perhaps spend some time researching and perhaps applying for outside scholarships that aren't directly connected to the colleges as well. I know we mentioned the OA website earlier. Ms. Carney, in one of the pieces of the OA website, has a fairly detailed financial aid section that includes several outside search engines. We also were notified about several scholarships over the course of the year that maybe are not OA specific, but are regional and OA is being specifically notified regarding. So we will share those out to students also through Naviance. And it is challenging for students to really apply for scholarships, I think, while they're still figuring out how to apply to college. But if they're able to kind of get through their applications a little bit on the earlier side, it then lets them kind of more intentionally move to kind of making sure they're maximizing their financial aid eligibility and minimizing the cost of whatever college they're ultimately going to go to. The other thing is, you perhaps have started to hear increasingly about colleges that are offering free tuition, including all the community colleges and then some four-year colleges. A lot of the free tuition options, especially at the four-year colleges we're seeing, are kind of dependent on family income. So to access those free tuition opportunities, those would all be dependent on you all filling out the FAFSA. The FAFSA wouldn't really be an optional part of the process if you were trying to access the free tuition opportunities that exist and are becoming available at a lot of really quality institutions. So just another kind of piece of the puzzle as you're kind of thinking about the next steps and the cost component of it too.
That is a lot of information we just pushed out. Please don't panic. And remember, I am going to send it out so you can always refer to the information. And your counselors are here too, so reach out to your student's counselor if you have more questions, you want to schedule a meeting. We're always here to help you guys through this process. And again, we will offer another event in September. But we'll also be here for a few minutes if any of you want to come up for individual questions. Okay? Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.